Well, we hope you're enjoying the conversations as we now enter Mark chapter 5. And since this is an action-packed chapter, we won't spend any time spinning our wheels here. You ready?
You ready to go?
Go for it.
All right. We have the Matthew 5. We pick up the demon-possessed, Mark 5. We pick up the demon-possessed man, and we're going to work through, we're going to exposit or talk about the text as we go through. So
Okay.
instead, it's just little bites and stuff like that, because this is going to go on for, for a while, but hopefully it'll bless your spiritual soul and your day. Then they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes, or depending on what translation, the Gerasenes. And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tomb a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tomb, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And always night and day he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. And he cried out with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you, by God, that you do not torment me." For he said to him, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit."
Okay.
The man being among the tombs is just heavy with all kinds of implications, especially when you're talking about people of the Jewish faith,
Right. Yes.
and their ceremonial laws and different things that were around him. This man was in the tomb because of the fact that I guess today maybe we would say he had a psychopathy, or something.
Psychosis, yeah.
And so he had some problems there, and he couldn't control himself. And so he was a danger not only to himself, but he was a danger to others. And so already you that are listening probably saying, that's my block, that's my neighborhood, that's my city, that's been my life. Come on, talk to me about this now, And so he's letting you know that this man is in a bad situation. And not only was he in a bad situation, his situation would never change as long as he was where he was, because of the fact that in Jewish faith, you didn't touch dead people or dead things, because it made you ceremonially unclean. If you were unclean, you could not go to the priest, and you could not go in and around the holy of peoples in the worship. You could not do it. So basically, he was in a bad situation, and that situation, as it stood, was never going to change.
Right.
Okay, and so he was there, and he's crying out. So we know that he's going through probably some periods of lucidness, and then some periods of manic or depression, or different things like that are going on with him. He can display signs of unique strength and stuff like that, which when you've been watching television shows or cop shows or something like that, and a person is on certain kind of drugs and they throw 3 or 4 people off of them, okay, so now you have kind of the picture that is here with him. And he couldn't change the situation, because as long as he stayed there, he could never become clean, which means he could never be in the worship. He could never be around the other people, because that was the way the law was. And so his situation wasn't going to change. And when he saw Jesus coming, and it's not just the seeing of Jesus with the physical eye, but those demons that were there with him. Okay, and as we're reading this today, see in some way, demons are some of the stuff we go through, the addictions, the predispositions, the lack of control. Look at this kind of way when you're going through it. The demon said, "Well, wait a minute. They saw him too, and so, and they're trying. The demons now are trying to, if possible, stand between this man and Jesus. They're trying to get right in the middle, so that this person, whatever it takes, will not come in contact with Jesus." Well, this sounds like a preaching lesson here, doesn't it? Like that. That they're going to have, and so that kind of force is working on us today. That as you're trying to go do good, that Satan is just going to let you, Patrick, you're having a pretty good day. Your last week wasn't as good as you wanted it to be, but you're on a roll now for Jesus. So I'm going to let you go this week and let you have this roll for Jesus because you're on. You think Satan is ever going to sit back and say, Rick, you're doing good, so I'm just not going to bother you. Go ahead and do this. Oh,
Yeah,
no.
no.
It's like a wrestling match. When he sees us coming, it's like a wrestling match, and he means, I mean, to take you down. Because you're not, and if you get over to where Jesus is, it's not going to be because I didn't fight you, which means there's many times when you feel like you've been through a fight to do the wrong thing. That's exactly what you have been through, a challenge to get there to do that. And so that's the scenario that's setting up. He's out there, he's in a situation that he cannot change for himself and is not going to change for him unless there's some kind of intervention that goes on. And so Jesus, and if we read in another book of the gospel, Jesus knows what he's going. When he goes to the other side, those in the boat don't know what they're getting ready to get into,
Right.
but Jesus already. As a matter of fact, that's why Jesus was headed there. I got an appointment over on the other side, with somebody that needs me, and that's the need thing about this. So don't miss that point. He didn't show up there by accident. He showed up there because that was on his schedule, to do. He saw that. He doesn't leave us in the middle of our challenges. Okay, so let's open it up and bring you in.
Okay. One, people always ask, they'll say, well, was this fellow mentally ill, either because of organic brain disease, traumatic brain injury, something like this, genetic fault? Or is this just an ancient way of saying that? Or is it a real demon? And I'm going to go with the demon. The Bible talks about he had a spirit. NIV says impure spirit. Most of the time, the word demon doesn't show up in these. It just will say a spirit, and then you have to determine from their behavior whether it was from the devil or from God. And so translators put that in. The interesting to me, Luke is a physician. And so when he has Jesus healing people, he differentiates between epilepsy and demons. He splits them apart. There's already an understanding, in other words, at this stage, that there are some physical illnesses that are not caused by demons. And Luke splits them. It's not split here, but eventually we're going to run across Luke, and we're going to be able to talk more about this. But I did have a question, because I don't know the Talmud or the Mishnah. Never read a book on them, actually. I've just read snippets. When this guy comes to Jesus, I would assume, although not written, some of his apostles are trying to get in the way, because you try to block an unclean person from your rabbi. And they did call him rabbi. And so if he is your rabbi, I guess what I'm asking is this: at what remove is the unclean? We know he's unclean because he's living among the tombs. If he gets and touches Jesus, does that make him unclean? I don't know the answer. Do we know the answer?
Wow, that's a neat question to ask. And the best way to understand it is that when Jesus came in contact with the lepers, he moved among them, and in actuality, or like the one with the issue of blood,
Right. Going to get to her soon.
He allowed them to touch him,
Yes.
the leper. And now nobody else would, because that was a contagious disease,
Right.
and they didn't know how to control it nor cure it. That's why in this case he's out in the tomb, and the woman was wearing, and people would be wearing black, if they had certain kind of thing, and they had to shout unclean, unclean.
Right.
They went through that kind of stuff. Right. And so part of the whole picture is that when Jesus moved among them and let him touch him, because when they touched him, he took away their defilement, but it did nothing to him. He did not contract the disease.
There you go.
And so the picture is that when Jesus says, I can take away your sin, look at that illness now. Jesus touched him. He's clean, and Jesus is not defiled. That's what the Spirit of God does. That's what God does. That's who he is. And this speaks volume to people who have done certain things, a number of things in their lives that they just can't get past.
Right. Yeah.
They literally can't get past, and it's literally dragging them. It sucked all the life out of them, and then they're dead. Jesus said, I can give you life. I can give you life. Okay, I'm going to give you a crazy example of a movie that many of you may have seen, but it really gives you the point. I think it's called Man on Fire. I think that's a movie with Denzel Washington.
My favorite actor.
Yeah, Man on Fire. He had done some counterinsurgency work for the government,
Right.
and we all know that. You fall off the world when you do those things. Okay, so he winds up, I believe it's in Mexico or something like that, and he's tried to kill himself, a couple of times, because he cannot live with what he has done. He cannot rationalize it. He can't make it work. Nothing. So he's tried it, and then in the course of the movie, he even tries to shoot himself while he's looking at it, but the gun does not fire the bullet, so he keeps the bullet. Okay, and I won't go into what he did. If you watch the movie, you'll know how that bullet shows up again. All right, but it's the little girl. Is that Dakota?
I do not remember who it was.
The little girl. She's trying hard to make an attachment with him, and just be a friend and stuff like that. And so finally, he starts looking at the girl. I have to take care of her.
Right.
I've got to watch out for her. I've got to be there, because somebody's going to take her life or take her away if I don't. And it's her smile, her life, her energy that kind of brings back. She gives him a little gift, and it has been forever, probably most of his life, since he's ever stopped. And you can see it in his expression in that movie when she gives him the gifts. He kind of pauses and, should I accept it? This is going to open some feelings and emotions. So okay, and so it's and so in that you see him dealing with those demons, and somewhere in it, the other actor in there they had done counterinsurgency work together. He's explaining why Denzel's why he's doing what he's doing, and they're asking him. I think the news reporter asking why is he on this mission? What is he doing? He said he's getting ready to paint his best masterpiece right here. He's gonna go get those folks who did. So get out the way and let him do it, because she showed him it's all right to live again.
Right.
And that's what Jesus is. It's not just the fact that he's showing us that, but he's also giving us the power to do. Because some of us, even when we see it, we're still so wrapped up in our sin, our problem, or the hurt, and the fact that we can't go back and undo it.
Right.
And the fact that that's always people may not talk about it and stuff, but we wish to God was just I can take that away. I can make you whole again. That's going to be back there, but I can so take your mind and your spirit, your person. I can so take that and move and work with you to where that does not debilitate you anymore. It'll become a strength for you, for where I want you, to do, and to get you to accept it. That the healing. That makes sense.
Great movie. Of course, it's Denzel, so it's a great movie. And I won't do a spoiler. I'll just say there is a Christ-like event near the end, where he moves from being killer to more like Christ. And that's all I'm going to say. Another thing here that often people ask, why are the demons, why do they recognize him, and why are they so terrified? And my response has always been, well, in the book of Job, Satan's walking in and out of heaven. They know the plan. Satan rejects the plan. So they know what Jesus is doing. They know he will come to earth. They know some of the plan, but they're not omniscient. They don't know everything. So when they see Jesus actually working out the plan, they've chosen the wrong side. They've gone with Satan. They were opposed to the plan. And in my opinion, I think some of the angels fell because they could not accept that Almighty God would put on the flesh of these tiny little insignificant things and then die for them. This did not sound right. So Satan in his pride pulled some away. Now they see it's happening. And so it's kind of like in Mark chapter 1, is now the time? Is now the time that you've come to hurt us? And here they shout, what do you want? Don't hurt us. Don't torture us. And then Jesus asked a really interesting question. And you didn't get to verse 9 yet, but I know you're getting there. What is your name? The significance of names in that culture, very, very powerful. And there are some cultures, and I think what we've agreed to call the developing nations, that still you have a secret name that is known only to you and your parents, because the belief that if somebody else has that name, they can have some power over you. So when Jesus asked him, what is your name? That's interesting because Jesus would know these angels. He would know them by name. And I'm not sure the response given here is a name or whether it is well, there are lots of us. By the way, I think getting sarcastic or smarmy with Jesus is a really bad idea. It doesn't seem to me like a good life choice. But when people ask me, how did he know? I always say, well, they knew about this for a long time. And then when Jesus shows up and they realize he's serious, he's really going to live on this planet and do these things, I think then they got terrified. They backed the wrong horse. They realized now, backed the wrong horse, they'd put their ladder against the wrong wall, whatever you want to say. They realize what box they're in, and they're terrified. Do you want to read on, or do you want to say more? Or
So I'll pick up and read it then where you started, or where
verse 9, yeah.
Then he asked him, what is your name? My name is Legion, for we are many. And Legion, military term, I think, of about 6,000.
About 6,000 in a fully manned legion, yes.
Yeah, and that's scary even at the outset. In our forays today into mental illness and disorders and stuff like that, when you're talking about people or you're in an environment where a person has multiple, personalities, and you've been more in that environment than I have, so I'm really a spectator looking in. But as a pastor, I have been, and a person who had at least 3 or 4 a couple of times, and even that, was scary to me. I mean, I was way out of my wheelhouse, and other than I know God is in this thing here. Other than that, I'm looking for, okay, now who, if there was a priest that said I dealt with it before, I would have said, come on in, because, and especially when you start. Especially when some, I think they call it a crisis thing. It's when something snaps or triggers and stuff like that, and you start seeing them go through that, and of course, then it made me really wonder, Patrick, the people that grow up in the house, that live inside the same house with this person, how do they survive?
Yeah.
How do they go about life? How they do it? And a psychologist I was talking to, because I had to get some clarity on something, and he said, Rick, have you ever stopped to think about the hell that this person goes to sleep with every night and the hell they wake up
Right.
with every morning. And that statement has stayed with me since the day. I mean, it's a part of my everyday reality to help me look at things differently, because I never thought, basically, that's the hell that they go. And their only minor relief, maybe it's not even relief, maybe something that they've been prescribed to take, and if they can't get that anymore, something that they found on the street corner, to take those edges on. And I said, my God, we've got to keep God near to us, and then we've got to do better. But it shows you the severity, of this person, and I can't, because the text just isn't clear. I can't wrap my head around all of it, but I do know, that when the pigs ran off the cliff, it wasn't one, it wasn't two, it wasn't three. It was it was a herd, whatever that means, a large, and I don't know if there were multiple demons in each one, but this, and so, but it's this whole, we seen the bunker sticker, be kind, you don't know what a person is going through,
Right.
and I am very much not for bumper sticker theology. That's what we call it in the school, bumper, because normally it's not complete enough.
Right.
See, it's all right for that statement, but that statement has to have some other stuff around it.
Right.
To, like let go, let God. Wherever do you see that just like itself?
Yeah.
Wherever do you see that play out? It
Yeah.
doesn't, because you can, but you do that inside the context of a bigger thing that you're doing. Okay, and so this is a severity, the magnitude, the enormousness of his problem. But God can manage this, because he's throwing you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the really ugly at you. And he doesn't go off, I mean, he doesn't, by go off, I mean turn around and run away. He engages that, and that's a story of our life. The things that we're seeing now, the movements of people, things that are causing and stuff like that, we can't run from, because if you have a child and your child has a child, somebody with your blood is going to be here. And at some point in time, you're looking. How many times have you and your audience said, the reason I'm doing this because I got a child that's coming up, and I don't want my child to have to deal with it. How many times have we been there? If it wasn't for our children, I think we'd be in a lot worse,
Sure.
situation, because we're always trying to think about I made it through, but I don't know if this baby is going to make it through the way I did, and so and thank God for that, because it keeps us thinking. You want me to keep going or bring it?
We're good.
Okay.
Yeah, I sometimes just behave because I don't want my grandkids to be ashamed of me. But I also see the world we're leaving them, and I'm not happy. We used to deal with mental illness much more effectively. We had hospitals that you could put them in, and they would be treated. They could do art and the like. But another movie actually helped bring about the fall of them, and that's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And it made people think that's what happens in mental hospitals. Well, no, but it did. There was a barbaric period with lobotomies and electroshock and such. By the way, electroshock works great for many people for many illnesses. That's, again, a therapy that got kind of destroyed by One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was a book, not a statement of how things usually were. So we shut down the mental hospitals. And the ones we have now, you cannot put somebody in there if they don't want to be there, generally, for more than 48 or 72 hours, according to your state. I even had people in one state call me, police, saying they got a guy, and he'd written a manifesto and meant to do harm to these people, and I think I was number 3 on his list. And I said, so what should I do? They said, well, we don't really know. We can only put him in hospital for 48 hours, and we have to release him. Well, the homeless problem is really a mental illness problem. You see a homeless person, they're not. The media myth is they're just like you and I, they just missed a payment. That can happen. I've seen it happen more often than I wish. But the vast majority, mental illness, alcohol, drugs, usually a combination of these. And somehow we must become, we release them thinking we're being sympathetic. We have harmed them. Somehow we have to have a better answer. But here, the demons are plainly afraid of Jesus. And what happens next is rather fascinating, and I'd like to hear us go through that. He says, "My name is Legion, for we are many," and he begs Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. Now, the Roman Catholic Church, I don't know about the Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic Church says people can be possessed, but not places or things. I'm not sure that the word possessed is the right word here. Anyway, if I understand correctly, that's not the word being used that we often translate possessed, but it's more like being demonized or harassed. But for some reason, they wanted to stay right where they were. And Jesus uses an enigmatic phrase in another situation when he says, when you bind the demon and throw them out, they wander in waterless places looking for a place to go. I don't know what that means, but it's certainly a haunting message. And these evidently felt at home in the tombs with this guy and did not want to be sent away. I don't have any theological backup, or rather background, to give more depth to it than that. It just is a fascinating, haunting concept to me. But then what happens next? Take us in there from verse 11 forward.
Now a large herd of swine was feeding there near the mountains. So all the demons begged him, saying, "Send us to the swine, that we may enter them." And at once Jesus gave them permission. Then the unclean spirits went out and entered the swine. There were about 2,000. And the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea and drowned in the sea. So those who fed the swine fled, and they told it in the city and in the country. And they went out to see what it was that had happened. Then they came to Jesus and saw the one who had been demon-possessed and had the legion sitting and clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who saw it told them how it happened to them who had been demon-possessed and about the swine. Then they began to plead with him to depart from the region. Okay.
Yeah, so many questions. Before I get to the pigs, just an observation. Just like the apostles in the boat, when they saw the power, they were afraid of him. Absolutely. Here they see the power and they ask, "Would you please leave?" I find that fascinating, and I'm not, most of the time I can empathize. I can put myself in and say, well, I would have said the same thing. I'm not sure I would have. So there's got to be a backstory here. Were they making commerce on him? For example, one of the mental hospitals in London, Bethlehem Hospital, was such a house of hell in the way that the mentally ill were treated, that people would pay to come in and look and laugh at the mentally ill people. And it was always so loud. The London accent of the day compressed Bethlehem to Bedlam. And that's where we get our word Bedlam, even for this day, for noise, uncontrolled noise and activity. Were they making money off this guy, or were they just terrified of what else Jesus was going to find? Because there were pigs. Now, I don't know who the Gerasenes, Gergesenes were. Do you know if they were a Gentile people, or were
they? I don't, and I haven't read anything that clears it up anymore. The closest is that they were not Jewish. They were not that contact, and it may have been a kind of a half-breed or something like that, because of the fact that they were in and around. If you follow, they were in and around, and so that's the best. And it just doesn't go into it more than that. And maybe by intent, because that shows up again, in the miracle stories and the gospel, is that it's not meant to paint you definitely into a corner and say this is that. It's meant to give you a cast of something else that's happening over there. but the Jesus coming, him seeing Jesus, in the interaction with the demons. Um, I have yet come to a good conclusion with the interaction with Jesus and the demons, and saying, okay, don't cast us out,
Right.
and
Can we go to the pigs?
yeah, and why would if I had been on the other side of the equation, no, we're going to, I'm out. But the realization was them being out doesn't mean 2,000 less or whatever. It doesn't translate that kind of way, because the evil and the authority of evil is still here. So you can't look at it that kind of way. And so, well, was he showing mercy? Was there some
Well, first of all, I'm always surprised there are pigs there. But agreed, when the pigs ran into the sea and drowned, they were now depigged, that area. Demons didn't die. I think perhaps that aspect of the story was to show that the demons are not as smart as Jesus. They don't know the future as Jesus does. They're not in control of their own future, but Jesus is. So this is a story of Jesus meeting demons. Jesus best the demons. And in that we can take great comfort.
Yeah.
And also the way that demon people act with terror when Jesus walks in. It's almost like the old about song out of the late 50s, early 60s, My Boyfriend's Back, and you're going to be, because when Jesus walks in, it's like, okay, we're in big trouble now. But it's a very bizarre story, but I think the main point of it is stick close to Jesus, because the demons are afraid of him. Yeah. They're not afraid of us, but they're afraid of him. They go in, they fall into the sea. Oh, I do have to tell you another story here. When I worked in Detroit area for 10 years, I was asked to come over to the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, to do a 2 or 3 day thing on faith and science and culture. I did not realize what I was doing was going into a group that were agnostic or atheist. I thought I was going into a mixed group. Well, some of them used to be very well versed in Scripture, and one of the young ladies said Jesus did not keep the law perfectly, and she referred to this, and she said, which is it? Jesus took away that man's livelihood and destroyed his property. So either he didn't keep the law, or he isn't God and didn't understand. This offended her and proved to her that Jesus could not have been God, because he would have sinned here. My response is, I'm not sure Jesus was fond of pigs. And if they're in an area where even non-observant Jewish people are, they know better than to have pigs. And by the way, that wasn't just a Jewish thing. Much later, when Muhammad comes along and Islam, they're every bit as much against the pigs. In Semitic society generally, they were opposed to this. But I found it interesting. She used this story to try to prove Jesus wasn't all that. And I'm going, I think you missed the point of the story. Don't get hung up on the pigs. We can get more pigs. I don't know if anybody's ever said that to you or not.
Just a part, as you mentioned about over in the Muslim faith, with the pigs and stuff like that. Yeah. But nothing in the sense of him taking away the livelihood. And that is one of the part of the stories that you can't nail down every piece and say it's an exacting, because it's not written for that purpose. It's not written like a scientific journal that says that this planet is tilted at this angle and this happens. It's not. It tells you there's a planet out there that has something special going on, and it goes on.
So we find the point of the story.
Because exactly, and in here there is a concept, and I was trying to grab hold of it in my mind. In the First Testament, there was a religious belief that gods were territorial.
Yes.
Okay, there was
Yeah,
a
we
belief
see that
that
in Daniel.
yeah,
Yeah.
that gods were territorial, and we see it. There was a prophet, and the king asked him to come curse
Yeah,
his
Balaam.
enemy,
Yeah.
Balaam. Yeah, okay, to curse his enemy, and the king said no, and then he went. And okay, we know the story and stuff like that. And so that whole plays out. You have to understand that because they believed that there was a god of that mountain, and a god of that mountain, a god of that mountain, and stuff like that. And so they believe that if you just move to a different location,
Exactly.
if you're not being blessed here, you can be blessed over there, because that's the way that they thought. And and of course that wasn't the case, and eventually Balaam has to deal with what he has to deal with and stuff like that. Well, we're here. There's some maybe of the flavor of that in there. Don't send us out of the country, because the people would have understood something of that. Maybe they won't flourish over there the same way, or maybe we don't know. But there may be some of the flourishing there just because there was that concept there. And that was even a belief among, God's people to a certain extent, until Christ really was doing it. And in a sense, you had all these different kingdoms, well, not all of them, but you had different kingdoms around, and they reigned over territory. So they believed that, the God, and he's constantly showing them that I'm not that God. I'm not that kind of person there. And then the thing of the healing that came out of it, when the swine leave him, and then we see him in his right mind, sitting, and as you mentioned, and the people say, like, okay. And so they had a man out among the tombs, living out there, that was screaming night and day, that was cutting himself, that self-mutilation. Okay, he's going through that. And now you see him sitting down. He's got clothes on because he's not constantly throwing them off. He's having a conversation, and it sounds like somebody, but now you want the person who brought this about, you want them to go. And so when that person was out of his mind, was crazy, was this, that, and the other, you will find that he was out there by himself. But now that he's right, you want the person that created it, you don't want to have anything to do with them. And if that does not sound like some things we move through, in life now, I don't know what does. We see what Jesus is doing, and they're saying we don't want it.
Right.
Because we'd rather have him out there crazy, knowing where he is, chained up, although he keeps breaking the chains, stuff like that. We're better with that problem than we are with this person sitting here now. But most of all, as you said, what does this mean for us?
Right.
Had they built their gains, on the backs of people that they shouldn't have, in situations they shouldn't have, what does this mean, for us? Or maybe all of a sudden they realized, well, I know I was better off than him, but now that he's here doing that,
That does interrupt the social order.
yeah,
It does.
What does that leave, for me?
Yeah.
And can you do something to me that I may not want you to do to me? And this is where this mysticism and this kind of witchcraft kind of inks itself in. Are you going to do some voodoo over me and have you? And some people believe that even in simple church, they believe that there's something going on with God. And I said, no, that's not what this is. And so, but people have a right to have questions and doubt about anything, just because we've seen so much, we've experienced so much, and then you have so many bad actors, bad people out there that are doing whatever they do.
Yeah. The shout, Jesus is here, is not universally positively heard, because there's some with some of our lives.
Yeah.
We're running up against our time limit, but this last bit makes me love Jesus even more. As Jesus was getting to the boat, the man who'd been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he's had mercy on you." You're starting a movement, and it's a mustard seed. You need it to grow. You want people. You want them to, and what testimony this guy could be if he walked around Jesus and Jesus goes, "Now tell your story." That would build the crowds. But this man's family has missed him. And that was more important to Jesus, that he get to be back with them. we both were raised in different forms of legalism, but basically in the same tribe. And I can remember we had a man in our church that was a very, very high up in an insurance field. And so a lot of times he was out and working long hours because you have to work the hours that your clients do. Well, he came to me early on at my time at that church and said, Patrick, I just want you to know I'm not going to be there on Sunday night because in our church, if you weren't there, you were a bad person. And he said, and I said, okay. And I didn't go further, but he felt a need. And he said, I'm so away so much of the week. Sunday nights is a time I know I can be with my wife and my children, and we can visit and we can eat. And I said, I will become very angry if I see you at a Sunday night. Go be with your family. We took a blessing in that in our nation, we can build a building and put a sign out there, even to let people know what we're doing, and we can come to it and worship as a group. But we took that and then we used that as our church, as our sign of power. And then we took power over other people, saying, you better keep coming and support this brick and mortar, pay for the maintenance, pay for the preacher and all the other. We take blessings and turn them into burdens. Jesus takes our burdens and turns them into blessings and says, no, you don't need to follow me. You need to be home. And with that, we've got to quit. But thank you for leading us through one of two incredible stories right in a row. And we'll hit the next one next week. But God bless all of you, and we will see you next week.